And with the ballots, these are ballots. And so when a person signs the ballot, they sign their name, their address, their email, their phone number. Because you see, we're going to double check that they properly voted. And we're going to have that piece of paper in a box. So that when people later on ask, was this the will of the people? It sure as hell is. Go check any one of those papers in this box to determine that that citizen living down there on that strasse voted. Yes. So you see, you've got the proof and you've got the verification. And it's totally transparent. You see, that's what saves it. That's what creates the dynamic. There's two things going on. There's a legal process and there's a dynamic political process. They go together and they strengthen each other. And so after you get, now I don't know the number, but I would just give you by definition. In the last parliamentary elections of Switzerland, there was a final number. I don't know if it was 2 million, 10 million, or whatever. Let's say 10 million for arbitrary.
Well, it can't be 10. We only have 7.5 million people.
Okay, so the numbers aren't very big, which makes it even better.
Now, for an initiative, you need how much? 130?
100,000.
100,000 signatures.
No, signatures. I'm talking about votes.
Well, it's the same.
Well, no, it's not the same. Because you see, the signatures are on a petition to have it considered. That's what I want to stay away from. I don't want the government to consider a damn thing. The minute you step into the government, they take control, whether you like it or not. And so what I'm saying is so let's arbitrate. Let's say 6 million people voted in the last nationwide parliamentary vote. Okay? That means that if you believe in the majority vote, which of course everybody buys, not a minority vote, majority. So that means if you got 3 million votes plus 1, you get a majority. But I'll tell you, if you get 3 million people signing for the Swiss National Initiative, Citizens Initiative, you'll be able to get 4 million, 5 million. Once the people wake up, it will explode. It's just like the Occupy. Once people realize that with this power, I can now address the things I believe in. Collectively. You do an initiative, the majority will prevail. And human beings won't go backwards. Human beings will go forward. Representative government is designed to keep everybody in civic adolescence. Oh, I want this, but I don't want to pay any taxes. I want that, but I don't pay any taxes. People are prepared to pay taxes if they think the money is properly spent. Now, how do you get to civic adulthood? Same way we raise our children. Give them responsibility, more and more, and all of a sudden they become adult and they act responsibly. And people need to make laws. The benefit of what I'm talking about is fine. You'll get better government, but you'll get individual civic maturity. That maturity will carry over to your spirituality, to your families. When one part of your body or your intellect is immature, it affects the other parts of your body. So we create this civic maturity, it will inure to your benefit as a whole person. It's a win-win from a policy point of view, and the only objection really is, I don't really trust the people. That's the only objection. When push comes to shove, and I tell you, I have unreserved faith in the people. Now, I don't know why with my political career that I have that. I don't know. I have it. I don't know why. But it's like my metabolism. You know, it's like my blood type. I don't know. I got it. And so I have unreserved faith in the people because, like in answer to your question, it's like the Wall Street. They got a whole agenda. They want to see changes. I want to see those same changes. God, do I want to see those changes. But I know I've learned in life that unless I find a way to empower the people, those changes will never come about. And so you need this meta legislation. So I don't get involved about talking about issues, because it's tough enough to just explain what I've just explained to you, because it's totally out of the box. You've not reflected on the fact that you are the sovereign. See, we are all individuals, and we feel powerless between the onslaught of the complexities of society, not to speak of the military force of the government. But life is complex, and science has rushed ahead. I mean, what we're accomplishing today in communications and science is awesome. We can't believe what's going on. And we govern ourselves with a system that's 250 years old, that's totally irrelevant to the 21st century. Many times when I'm talking, I use the Einstein definition of insanity, which is to repeat over and over something that doesn't work. That's insane.
Hoping to have a different result.
That's right, that's right. And so, who's smarter? The people that don't vote or the people that do vote? I don't know. I'm one of the guys that votes, but I'll tell you, in this presidential election in the United States, I'm publicly going to announce and encourage people, do not vote for president. Either candidate is just terrible. Just terrible. Save your vote and vote for yourself. Vote for an initiative. You see, well, other questions. I know you want to get into the back. You got a question, please.
Yes. First, I want to say to you that your speech was excellent, and we also tried to get some parliamentarians to get here, but the time was too short to get them, and they have also an important meeting. But I can bring you the best wishes from some of them. And my question is also a bit like the question of Manfred. A lot of Swiss people don't know the words of direct democracy. And what do you say to them concretely?
What I say to them concretely is, if they want to have influence on policies that affect their lives, their personal lives, they have to become lawmakers. They have to be able to make laws just like their elected representatives, but not under the present system, which is integrated with their representatives, who then sabotage, directly or indirectly, the lawmaking process of the people. And I do not say this with any prejudice. I've been a legislator. I think it's important to have good elected people that have integrity and honesty. But I know the system. The system of power is corrupting. And it corrupts everybody from St. Francis Assisi on down. And so the only way, I believe in term limits. So the only way to limit the amount of power anybody has. So when I'm not really distressed over the fact, I don't know if there's any legislators here, but I'm not distressed over that they're busy debating stuff. That doesn't bother me at all. Because I must confess to you, I have never been able to persuade a politician, an elected politician in the United States about what I'm talking about. And when I was running for president, and I had all those other politicians on the podium with me, they didn't even understand what I was saying. They don't understand it. Their minds do not work that way, right? You know something? If you're unaware and I walk up to you and ask you, do you want to vote to empower yourself? You may be totally unaware. You've never even thought of this. All of a sudden, you say, well, I don't know if I'm going to sign this. I don't know if I want to vote because I don't know anything about this, because you're unaware. Now, what's going to happen in conjunction with that campaign will be, as we raise money, an advertising campaign to make you aware. So the next time you're approached, you say, oh, I'll sign it. Or you may not. You see, there may be this problem in Switzerland, and I recognize it, is that you're too well off. You're too well fed. You're too good. And so maybe you need pain, suffering. There's a cliche that the voyage of 1,000 leagues begins with the first step. I found in life that when you start something, you can't believe what will happen. There's consequences and there's unintended consequences. Let me give you an example, and it can be good and bad. I filibustered the end of the draft myself, single-handedly, for 5 months. Now, Mike Mansfield, who was the majority leader, made it possible. Now, when I started that, and I was a freshman, and they said, oh, don't worry, this kid will lose interest. Well, I didn't lose interest.
Mike, I think you have to explain what filibuster is.
Oh, in the Senate of the United States, we have a very undemocratic, well, the Senate's undemocratic. I represented more moose than I did human beings. And so in the Senate, there's a process of rules where you can debate in an unlimited fashion if you've got the guts, okay? Now, in the old days, you've heard of Huey Long or others, you know, they would debate. And as long as you can hold the floor, they can't do anything. You could, and so how, in the old days when they would do it, they would debate, drink a lot of water, and they'd pee right on the floor of the Senate. When I did the debate for the draft, I had myself hooked up with a colostomy bag, and my staff was going to come in and bleed my colostomy bag. But it got very complicated legally. And so lo and behold, but we prevailed. The United States of America, the superpower of the world, does not have a draft. And I was happy to do that. And the reason why was that because we knew that Lyndon Johnson was able to expand Vietnam with the draft, because these young people didn't have political power. So now, that was the consequence is a good consequence. I get people introduce me and say, this guy saved my life. He stopped me from going to Vietnam. This guy, I owe him two years of my life because he stopped the draft. Okay? The unintended consequences? We have more private contractors in Afghanistan than we have military troops. And the same thing with, so by closing the door over here, they opened the door more terrible, because at least when we're killing people and they got a uniform on, we can identify who's doing the killing. But when these people do the killing, you don't see them. And now with the drones, who do you think's operating? They tell you that it's, well, first up, you know the United States, Obama got elected, you know, we're going to not torture people. We still have rendition. We still have secret prisons around the world. If you believe for a moment that a bureaucrat, an agent, is in there trying to get information, that he's not slapping the guy around or torturing them, you're naive. You know, it's just, and that's where, as a young person, I was blessed. I was a counterintelligence corps agent in Europe right after the Second World War. And so I saw it from the inside there. I saw it in the Senate of the United States at the highest level of government. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it. And I'll tell you, don't trust the government. Don't trust the government. Keep in mind now, I started this 25 years ago. That's a lot before the internet. We could have done this after Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. You can have people vote on the telephone. It's no big deal. You give people a PIN ID number and they vote. So, no. Representative government is designed to minimize the participation of people in government. That's a given. So now, with the media, we have the internet, and now your ability to blog. I'll give you an example. Fred has a blog. I met him. He found out what I was doing. He put on his blog what we were doing. We received more contributions from Germany. Now, it's small over Europe, but Germany, far and away, than I've received contributions from Americans in the United States. Does that not say something about the world? We are one world, whether you like it or not, and this one world is being ruled by corporations who are out there and no man with no controls of what they're doing. And we're fools if we let this continue. You know, there's an old saying, you deserve the government you're getting. And if the government's not very good, you deserve it because you haven't done, and now more so, because I put on a plate in front of you, I put on a plate in front of you a solution. And I don't know, and I'm fairly well read, and I do not, and I say this with humility, I do not know of any other plan in the world that has a legal basis and the constitutional basis to empower you. And you have to do it, not the government. And I know of no plan that, a lot of plans, well, yes, but then we gotta go to government to do this, gotta do that. The minute you go into government, they own you. Making laws is very serious. And so what you have to do is you have to process. All I've done is I've copied the process of how the Congress operates, and that's essentially how all legislative bodies in the world operate. Is you introduce, you qualify, you turn it over to a subcommittee, you have hearings, you have markups, you refer it to a higher body, the higher body votes on it, and then it's signed if you need a president or a head. That's not rocket science. And in the process that I have, we can tweak that so it becomes familiar with you. So when you say, you know, how are you going to learn about it? Well, here's the communication we have in the law. Every television station, network, has to put on a half hour or an hour description of the legislation, okay? And the same thing for radio, and the same thing for newspapers. And at the same time, the agency that you create to take care of the housekeeping duties of the people's legislature, they now have to publish a pamphlet that is mailed to every citizen. And they, at the same time, when the legislation is qualified, and there's 3 ways to qualify it, when it's qualified, you set up a website for that single piece of legislation. And so everything that happens to that legislation in the deliberative process, in the hearings, because we have a deliberative committee of citizens drawn at random that are qualified ahead of time, that this is, every little detail is thought out. So a citizen would have to be hiding under the table and not be aware that there's an initiative, because you see, you only have the initiative at the federal level 1 a week. That means you could handle maximum 52 in a year, and 1 at the canton level. So that means you could have 1 at the federal level, 1 at the canton level, and 1 at the city council level. You see, and now one of the most simplest things to figure out, and I was kicking myself, was in a legislative body, and that's where my background comes from, legislation is ordered based upon the majority party. So if you're in the majority party, you get your legislation considered. If you're in the minority party, you're screwed. You know, stand behind in the corner. So now, how do you do this with the people? You know, there's no parties. This is the beauty of it. Party politics is the privatization of public politics. That's what it is. So now, how do you do this? You turn around, and it was simple. It took me several months to figure it out. It dawned on me. We do it chronologically. Is it any simpler than that? You come in, you 3 have an initiative that you want to treat a subject, okay? We log it in through the Citizens, the Electoral Council Trust. We have a trust that is the agency that implements the procedures on behalf of the people. So when you go for your initiative, first off, we have a better system than that. You can't afford an attorney. So what we do is we provide for a battery of attorneys, because you're legislators. Who writes the legislation for them? You pay for it, and they have attorneys that do it for them. It's called the Legislative Council in my area. So lo and behold, you will be able to take up the telephone and call the Citizens Trust and say, the 3 of you have an idea that we want to put into an initiative form. And they say, okay, we will dispatch an attorney to talk with you about your idea. And this attorney will listen to you, and his job is not to take over the idea, it's to put it in legalese and to make sure it's constitutional. And to make sure it wasn't voted on 2 months earlier. Okay? So now, they give it back to you, you read this, you're not attorney, you read it, and like I say, if it doesn't make sense, oppose it. So you read it, oh yeah, okay, this is what we want to do. So now you got to qualify it. Now you didn't spend a penny. Now, if your idea is worth something, you're now going to spend a few coins. And here's what you do. You got 3 ways to get it qualified. One, you can turn it over to the federal legislature. And if they pass it without changing a word or a comma, it's qualified. But it's let's go to the vote of the people. The second one is you get petitions. And we would accept electronic signatures. So that becomes very cheaper than what you got right now. And then third, you take a poll, which is very cheap. Take a poll, and then 50% of the people want to vote on it, not vote for or against. See, when you're getting a petition signature, you're saying, oh, vote for this. All it's going to do is put it on the ballot. Don't worry. You know, you're not voting for it. When we were getting our deal signed, you're voting. It's a vote. So now those 3 ways, you get qualified. What's the first thing? Now, to pay for a poll or to get out and work hard to get the signature, it may take a little bit of money. But after that, you don't have to spend a sou. Not a penny, not a pfennig, nothing. Because do I spend money when I'm a legislator? I don't spend any of my money. It's all taxpayers' money that does the whole process. And I get perks besides. So now it goes forward. First thing we're going to do is have a public hearing. So the Citizens Trust turns around and appoints a hearing officer, a qualified person to hold a hearing. Now, you 3 sit on this side of the table with the hearing officer. And then the members from the legislature committee, they sit on the other side of the table. So they're listening to the testimony we take from experts, citizens, all about our initiative. And we do it with the finest technology. There's no reason why the people can't look at their television set and have a button to give their opinions. Totally. I mean, we use most advanced technology. That's not what representative government did. They don't want too much technology because the people get too much involved. So that's what we would do. Then the second thing you have is you need to have a markup, like a subcommittee of a legislative body. So we have pooled, maybe we pick 50,000 people in Switzerland. We qualify them from the garbage collector to PhDs. Doesn't make any difference. You devise a testing process to determine their civic maturity. And then their names are in the pool. Equal number of women, equal number of men. And then when you're ready for the subject, whether it's at the canton level or the national level, you pull people from the pool, 10, 15 people, whatever, and they sit and they go over the legislation. They look at what was testimony, they turn around and they can bring in experts and testify, and it's all visible. They sit in a room and they do this, but everybody can look at it. And then we can go, you as sponsors can go to them and say, well, this is what we mean. And then they can question you. And then they can amend this process. And then lo and behold, after that, so now we have a hearing, we have the legislative markup, and this was an idea I got from a German professor, incidentally, on the pool. Now it goes to, it's national legislation. It has to go to the legislature, and they got 90 days to vote yes or no in an advisory capacity. Now, why do we do that? Because a lot of people say, we don't want them involved. That's not so. What we want is we do want them involved. Because you see, we vote on cues. Do you know what a cue is? C-U-E. It's a cue. You know, when a singer misses a note and the person gives a cue, okay. Well, a cue, I'm drinking water. I presume it's safe. A little more water. I presume it's safe. Well, I didn't go investigate the company. I didn't ask her if she investigated the company.
It's tap water.
It's tap water. No, I didn't go to the municipal government and say, is the water system safe? When's the last time you tested the area?
We filtered it this morning.
Okay. Well, but where did you get the filter?
I don't know.
So you believe whoever sold you the filter, right? Okay. So what does that mean? You believe. You are taking that piece of information on a cue. You have no knowledge, but you know you live in a society that's supposed to be protecting the water. That's called a cue. legislatures operate on cues. We live our lives on cues. So when an initiative comes up, and Fred was saying, you know, people will vote in greater numbers. Of course they'll vote in greater numbers, but they'll vote on cues. I spoke with Charlie. Charlie spent a whole afternoon studying this initiative, and I don't have the time. I got to go to work. I got these kids and what have you. So all of a sudden I turned to Charlie, what do you think of this legislation? Charlie said, hey, it's good. It gives you 2 points. That's enough. I'm too busy. I'm going to vote for it. Or I'm going to vote against it. Do you see how that's how legislative bodies work on cues? I was a senator for 12 years, and I never read a piece of foreign legislation. And yet I voted on all of the big stuff. How did I base my opinion? Real simple. If this person, well, it's funny how it works. The person who's carrying the legislation, he's saying, you know, he's speaking for the, you walk up to him and say, oh, hey, Charlie, how should I vote on this? Well, I know he's going to say, vote for it. But that's code that I'm establishing with him, that when I'm carrying a piece of legislation and when he comes on the floor, you know, he'll maybe come up to me and say, I'm voting with you. Or he'll avert his gaze so he doesn't look at me in the eyes because I helped him. It's a process, and people are not, you're not experienced as legislators. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. You're an authority on your body and what's good for you. And the more you mature, the more you're going to become knowledgeable about this, and you'll vote accordingly. So now, here's the problem. What's the communication that we have? Let me share with you what's in the legislation. As I pointed out, as soon as it's qualified, it gets a website. And all that happens is video streamed on the website. So you'd have to hide from that. Secondly, in addition to the website, we're going to mail a brochure on the initiative for each initiative, not all of them together. Like in Oregon, they have a book on initiatives and others, 300 pages. Do you think a citizen's going to read that before you go vote? Hell no. That's a way to really gloss over it. So now you have the website, you get a brochure. The brochure has the economic impact, the environmental impact. It has all this pros and cons, and you can study this in addition to watching it because it'll be there on the website.
We have those brochures.
Pardon me?
Here we have those.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But then it doesn't.
But the government prints them.
Obviously. Well, in this case, it will be the agency of the people that will print it, and it will be paid for by the government. Because you see, the people's legislature, which is what we're talking about, is the same process as the representative government. They tax you for that, they'll tax you for our agency. And you see the process. And so now comes time to vote. Well, rather than vote on one day, you have a whole week to vote, 24/7. You could be on vacation in France or in San Francisco, and you can get on your computer and you can vote. Why do we have to have people physically go someplace to vote? It's ridiculous. It's a device to limit the participation. So now you vote. You got a whole week, and at the end of the week, they tally the votes, and the majority wins. That's simple. Here, I don't have a plan to change human nature. I've never said that I'm going to change how human beings act or think. What I'm saying is that people have a basic ability to identify their enlightened self-interest. And if I give you the tool to act on that knowledge, then I've done a fantastic thing. Because what I'm trying to do is to change the paradigm of human governance. And it's never been done. When you look at the problem, everything you just defined is a problem that exists under representative government. You don't know what the problems will be under what we're talking about. I don't know either. I just know that if you're going to enjoy the benefits of human governance, you've got to be involved in it, and you're not involved in it now. The best you do now is for a few seconds on election day, you give your power to somebody else. And then for the next 2, 4, 6 years or whatever, you beg or you go protest. That's all you can do. For a few seconds you had power. And then you didn't exercise that power very well because you're quite right. The corporations and the money used in politics have manipulated you and your thinking. But this is called maturation. This is the point I was making, that the most significant accomplishment of direct democracy will be the maturation of the individual human beings in society. And that's what life is all about. You start at childhood, grow up, and you hope that when you're my age and older, that you got some wisdom that comes from experience. You don't always have it. This is a joke, that you need the wisdom when you're my age to handle the debilitating features of your body, because your body's going to hell in the handbasket. And you got to be able to handle that maturely. So what you were describing is your observation of what it is right now. Now, I'll tell you, if I had an agenda, and we're going to do an initiative, we want to straighten out corporations on the commercialism, we really establish a law of fraud, that if you misrepresent, the head of the corporate leaders go to jail. In the United States of America, I believe in entrepreneurial. I've always been entrepreneurial all my life. But when I see these corporations, these public corporations rip it off, I mean rip it off, $30 million and the corporation's going broke, I would turn around and pass a law and say that a publicly traded corporation can pay its officials no more than 50 times the lowest paid person in that corporation. You want to see a change take place in corporate America, corporate world? Is all of a sudden the stealing that takes place at these mega corporations will end, or they'll have to go private. We need to encourage the entrepreneurial genius of the small people, and they've got it. My God, you see it here. When you look at two young men in a garage that started Apple, you know, you just look around. The talent is there. And that's the reason why I have unreserved faith. I'm giving you a tool. If you misuse it, there's nothing I can do about it. And I don't think you'll misuse it. I think you'll grow up as a result of the tool. But that's all I'm doing. I'm not solving the banking problem. I'm not solving the commercial problems. I'm not solving any of these problems. I'm giving you the tool to solve them. Isn't that an exciting trip? That's all I'm doing. Well, main goal is to try to raise some money. We need money to organize the world, to organize ourselves in the United States. Because the United States, believe it or not, and I say this as a person who loves this country, we are the problem. We are the problem today. We're a bully. We are an empire. We Americans think we're smarter than everybody else, and that is a bunch of crap. We are no different than anybody else. But in fact, we were in Prague, and there was this elderly gentleman. He said, "Oh, the Americans are so great." And all the, geez, listen to this person talk. If he only knew how bad it was. How bad it was. Where do you think the CIA comes from? It doesn't come from Zurich. You know, they may be in cahoots with the bankers down the street where I saw that big building. But it comes from us. Who's putting out the drones? You know, and of course, your country's going to buy some drones. I mean, it's supposed to be a good, big secret weapon for America. Hell no. They got to sell them to everybody because that's how they make profits. The whole name of the game is profit and power. And like the young man this morning was saying, you know, we need a society of love and sharing. I agree. But I also know from practical experience that we got to have some power, or we can't defend ourselves. And if you empower the people, let me repeat again, when you have a partnership between the people acting independent and representative government, the people become the senior partners. And if they don't behave, we can punish them. The way it is now, we don't behave, they punish us. Because we're not even in the partnership. You see the dynamic of what will happen if this thing matures? And as long as I have breath in life, I'm here speaking to a small group. I've been doing this for 20 years. And I know that at some point, we save all our records, our corporate records, so that if something happens to me, this will go on. What I've given you in documents is yours. It's no longer mine. I'll help, but it's yours now. And if you don't do something with it, it's your fault. Not my fault. I've done the best I can. What really motivates me is the national initiative, the National Citizens Initiative, not only for the United States. We get this in one major country, it'll go around the world like wildfire. Okay? So now how do I get it done in one country? I tried it in the United States, wasn't going. I ran for president because of that. I went to Korea because of that. I'm now making this tour because of this. But what happened was that I discovered the 9/11 movement. And I suggested, and Annie was in New York when this happened. I was at a meeting, they'd asked me to moderate something at the Washington Press Club. I did, and then they invited me to go to New York. I went to New York, and I'm sitting there with all these wonderful people that are so committed, and I said, look at, the mistake, and I said it gracefully, the mistake that you're making is that you don't have an actionable item. Educating the people is not enough because they don't have the power to act upon the knowledge that you're giving them. And so I suggested that what we could do in the United States, very imperfect way of doing it, was to go with the 12 states that have initiatives and go into those states, and I wrote, and when I had the idea, I didn't even write the legislation. I had to figure it out after. And I did it with legislative councils. And we wrote the legislation, 3 pages long, and we were prepared to file it in Oregon, Colorado, Massachusetts, California, but it cost some. Now what we found out is that we could use foreign monies in Colorado, in Oregon, in Massachusetts. So the money that I'm collecting because of his blog out of Germany, I can use that money in the United States, in Massachusetts. Now what happened in Massachusetts is that the deadline was September 7th, okay? And you have until November 18th. Well, we had a person who donated, one person donated $50,000, another person $10,000, and then plus we had this flow of money coming out of Germany and some out of Switzerland. And so we didn't have the $300,000 that it would take. And the math is real simple. You need 100,000 signatures, and it costs anywhere from $1 to $3 per signature to do it professionally. Now, you can't do it with volunteers. In the United States, you can get about 1/3 volunteers, but you can't rely on that. And so what happens is if I were to take the money we had, which at the time was about $60,000, if I were to start spending that money, which came very dearly, I started spending that money and I made a judgment that I couldn't get the signatures in time, that means the money would be lost. Now, I have the experience of having had that happen to me in Missouri 10 years ago. So I wasn't going to gamble with this money that this person put up. Because when he put up the money, he said, look, this is very serious money. I want you to spend it wisely. Well, I spent it wisely. I didn't spend it. I still have most of it in the bank. And so now, what happened in Massachusetts, we had a whole bevy of people that rose up, unbelievable volunteers in these various towns, and now they're all excited. We're going to have an initiative and we're going to make it the law of Massachusetts. And I was born and raised in Massachusetts. Can you imagine how excited I was to fight this battle right here in Massachusetts? And I got to tell them, we can't go forward. So I called a meeting. I'm about to leave town. I'd been there 2 weeks, and again I was getting sick. And I called them and I said, look at, and by the time I called the meeting, they had figured this out themselves. They said, Senator, We understand. But we're going to keep getting signatures. And what they're thinking is by confronting them, they're going to force people to think about the fraud of 9/11 by the American government. There's a poll that was taken in Germany where 89%, now it's reported to be a reputable poll, 89% of Germans do not believe the American government on 9/11. Can you imagine? Europeans, if this poll is represented, Europeans know better than Americans that the American government was lying. One of the problems is that's what we should have done. First off, we should have had a check to be able to pay for the contract, which we didn't have. Secondly, we should have taken a poll. And I'm a great believer in polls, if you're really scientific about it. And because they can tell you what you want to know. You can use focus groups, but I have a lot more confidence in polls. And so we should take a poll. But right now we're stuck. I've got Oregon, because I'm looking at a progressive community now. I'm not looking at Alabama. Okay? I'm looking at a progressive community. Oregon is a very progressive community. Massachusetts is very progressive. Colorado is progressive, and it's right in the middle of the country. So, but I don't know if I'm going to raise the money to do it. And I'm in a quandary. Do I raise money to turn around and do something that is going to have difficulties, and we won't have enough money? Because if I go back to California and I report to the people that I respect or on my board, and I say, you know, we don't have $300,000 to go into Colorado. Unless you're going to write a check, I'm not for going into Colorado. And so you've got to have them. The money is the mother's milk of politics. And we are in politics up to our eyeballs on this. So it now becomes, there are other opportunities. This is where, by my having experience going into Korea and knowing about what's going on in Europe, here, I've been trying to sell Freddie on the fact, look at, this is a small community. Imagine what ripples you would have in the world community if the Swiss would turn around and create their own independent initiative process. Imagine the impact that would have media-wise in Europe. Secondly, you could start it. You see, there's no time limit on this because you're not involved with the government. Now, there's nothing stopping us from getting a similar cadre of people in Paris or Lyon or Stuttgart or Berlin. You name it, we can start it. And so when I look at the protest movement of Wall Street, what I see is a phenomenon. And if this phenomenon can be moved over to use their attention-getting ability to do the work of getting the law enacted to empower. They're protesting. Protest only shows that representative government doesn't work. But if you now empower these people that are so dedicated to go do something to empower themselves, you've just changed the world. And I've waited all my life for this phenomenon to occur. And it had nothing to do with me. It just rose up like a phoenix.